Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, of course.
How are the kids?
They're good. I mean, I think we've turned a corner. I'm like probably speaking too soon with my toddler. She had some serious behavioral issues, but she's also getting closer to 3. Um, and then my little is on the other side of sickness, but then she just got her 2-month vaccination. So like there was some, fun times there. So she's just been fussy this week. And I'm like,
Oh, the good life.
my mom's like, make sure you're caring for yourself. And I was like, okay, mom. Between her like crying hysterically, puking all over me, like, I get you. Thank you. We'll get there. We're not there right now.
Someday. Someday.
Mhm.
Okay, well, I have to release this audio because it's all so good. So we'll just not even cut that stuff out if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Because you
sure.
you are just living like the real mom life here of
There it is.
newborn,
Yeah.
newborn, adding a second in. So
Hmm.
how old is Colby now?
Colby is literally like 2 months and a couple days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I am so grateful that you are on this episode of the Edmonds Mom's Room podcast. And if you are just tuning in, I'm Dr. Allison Felt, and we have Cynthia here. And I can't wait to. Cynthia's a working mom of 2 now, and she has an epic story of when she started with body motion to her recovery after her first. And I want to dive into all of it. I'm not going to give it any of it away because it's all so good, but we're gonna go through even your like prenatal journey round one, if you're open to
Yeah.
like just sharing whatever
Sure.
that looks like. Well, I know what that looked like, but kind of sharing where the holes were, and then your
Yeah.
recovery process after your first. Then we're going to dive into what your fertility journey looked like.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, then your pregnancy prep and kind of how you're feeling now after 2. You had
Yep.
an epic birth story. So if you're tuning
Not
in,
something we planned,
if
but it
you're
was
tuning
great.
in and you were in for one. I don't even know how to tease it other than being like it was fast and furious and magic, but and unexpected because it's everything that the doctors said would not happen and it
Yeah.
did happen. And it just the reason that you're here to share like a big piece of it is I just want to say like you have control over your body and
Yeah.
you can decide to change your body and you did that. And I think that that's something that the research can't show. And I think that's why doctors they have to cover their own asses. So they're not going to sit here and tell people like, oh, this can be done. They are going to sit here and tell you if you have another vaginal delivery, you're going to be signing up for surgeries for the rest of your life and be incontinent by bowel, like you're going to be pooping yourself forever, right?
Mhm.
So, um, yeah, you can choose to listen or you can choose to say, nope, not me. And you kind of did that. So I love it. And let's just get into it.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Where shall I start?
Okay, let's start with the I just want to so when you were pregnant with your first,
Hmm.
let's just chat through that. You had told me I knew I wanted to get pelvic floor physical therapy because I you were hearing about it. Uh,
Yeah. So one of my really good friends had had a baby already, and she was furious that pelvic floor therapy for women, like postpartum at the very least, is not a requirement because she has a bunch of family who lives in Europe. And she's like, this is like a standard of care, and moms get so much more time, and like the countries actually seem to care about what happens to women's bodies. And so she was like, whatever you do, get pelvic floor therapy. Like go in before, go in after. You have to help your body through this process. So I was like, thanks for the info because I had literally never heard of it before. And I went in, I made an appointment, and she was like, how you feeling? Cool. Do some like tilts, pelvic tilts on the ball and do some like circles. And she was like, yeah, you've got good, range of motion. So have at it. I mean, the only valuable thing I really would say I got out of it was that she told my partner to do some hip squeezes while I'm like in contractions, and that can help alleviate some pain, which we used, but everything else, I'm like, what? And then she literally said, like, I'll see you afterwards. And I should have pressed, like, wait, what? Like, what are you expecting to see afterwards? But I didn't, and it just that. appointment was literally a nothing burger. Like,
Yeah. Okay, let me jump in here a few
yeah.
things. Just so I can like educate the listeners. Like you were seeking out this care because you heard from a friend. So it's not like the doctors and midwives are even telling us to get this type of care, right? Like you just randomly heard from a friend. And I think, and obviously that, one of the huge reasons we're recording this podcast, we do all the marketing that we do is because we want to spread the word that like if you can prep your body adequately during pregnancy, then you have a really good shot at a fast postpartum recovery and feeling really good afterwards. And it really I don't fault that physical therapist because that's all she knows. And I think that just
Mhm.
speaks of like why you need to go somewhere that actually knows what they're doing in the prenatal process. They
Mhm.
they used to and still do teach in any pelvic floor courses that we don't evaluate pregnant pelvic floors until postpartum.
Mhm.
So that's the standard of care that we're looking at. Obviously, we're
Mhm.
trying to change that standard of care and we do things a lot differently at Body Motion, but you really have to advocate for yourself. And you don't want someone to just check you and be like, oh, you can do a Kegel, because the reality is the baby's not going to come out if you can do a Kegel. Like you need to be able
Yeah.
to put her down, right? And open up. That's how we get the baby out. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Mhm.
My other side note that I want to jump in about, and I promise I won't do this the whole time, but maybe I will.
You can.
Um, is the whole European thing. Because I used to be like that too. I used to be like, oh, all these women in Europe get prenatal and pelvic floor physical therapy postpartum. But the reality is, like with the NHI, what is it called? The National Health Program in like Great Britain and like
Yeah.
uh, in all those places, you like, yes, they get pelvic floor physical therapy, but most of it is like group classes. So it's not necessarily, which is better than nothing. Better,
Yeah.
way better than nothing, but it's not necessarily like each individual is getting this like hands-on care. I have friends that practice there, and that's how the national health system is set up, but it's not necessarily like you're getting like the kind of care, we're still talking about different levels of care, but it's still better than nothing, and they're definitely doing it better than us because we don't even talk about it to our patients apparently. We have to hear it from a friend. So
Yeah.
uh, okay, so are you willing, well, trigger
Sure.
warning, are you willing to share about your first birth?
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, I thought I looked on it, and I still do, like with such great pride, and it's a good memory. The only reason I even knew I had like even some trauma building up was from like a session, I think, where my body had it and I didn't even realize, and then emotions came out. So yeah, no, I'm good to share.
Okay, sweet.
Um,
Take us through your first labor and delivery.
yeah, my water basically burst in the middle of the night, kind of like movie style. And so we're like, okay, we're going, let's do this thing. We go into the hospital. It was probably about 3 a.m. and I was not in labor. And so they were like, hey, let's get you on Pitocin. And I knew enough. I didn't do a ton of research because I was like, these are the experts, right? Like they know what's going on. They do this every single day. I'm going to trust their inputs and their advice, um, which is very different the second time around. But they said, let's put you on Pitocin. But I did know enough that I was like, all right, let's try to like make active labor start without that intervention yet. So they had me doing the mile circuit. Nothing was happening. So like 11 a.m. they said we should really start this process because your water broke and we want to get baby out within 24 hours just from risk of infection and all that. So Pitocin started. Everything was fine until it like revved up. And I was still talking to my mom. I'm like, maybe I should take a bath. Maybe she's like, maybe you should get like an epidural, because my plan very much was to get have a medicated birth. And so I was like, I
Have a
just
medicated or unmedicated?
a medicated, like
Okay,
with an epidural was my plan.
got
There
it.
was no part of me that was even remotely attempting to go natural. Um, and so, we're like, okay, yeah, 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 bring him in, right? And I just remember for the next probably hour that we were waiting for the anesthesiologist, which is normal, right? That I was leaning over the bed and just, it was visceral. Like, I was like, what is this crazy thing that is happening? And I, to this day, can feel how much I thought I was beating the pain by like clenching my body as much as I possibly could. Um, but I thought like I'm winning. I am winning this, right? Then I got the epidural. Unfortunately, my body had started naturally pushing baby at least down. I don't know if out would have been the end result, but down. And while I was getting the epidural, and I was like, Mom, I'm pushing, I'm pushing, I'm pushing. And they were like, hold still, gal. You got to hold still because we're doing this epidural. So I ended up getting it. It worked beautifully. I got to rest for a little bit, but then I was like so fully blocked that I had zero connection whatsoever to the lower part of my body. I had no idea how to push, where to push, what pushing felt like or looked like or anything. Um, and so we definitely did the like, what is it, purple pushing, where hold your breath and count to 10. And I couldn't even last the 10 seconds. Like I like failed out at 5 or 6 seconds. And then I felt like a failure because I had to be like to try to go again. And all of it was like not very successful as to getting baby out. I mean, I think I pushed for 3 hours maybe. She eventually came out. I had a third, they said like a third plus degree. I don't know if they were like, we can't quite quantify. It's not quite a fourth degree, but a third plus degree tear. It took like 45 minutes to stitch me up. It was like a multi-layered process. Um, yeah. And I in the midst of that too had also, unknowingly started pushing some of my organs out of my body. So that's also a fun thing. They weren't out, but I did have some degree of prolapse. So I had no idea what that was before I gave birth.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times when you're having to push so hard and you're not
Yeah.
breathing baby down, prolapse is really common, especially if there's, a tight pelvic floor and your pelvis is having a hard time opening.
Yeah.
That can be a really common scenario. And that's why we love breathing baby out and
Mhm.
prepping the pelvic floor so the muscles are juicy and can open and stretch and be super healthy. Just to fill in some listeners here.
Yeah.
Um, but okay, thank you for sharing that. So baby comes out, and what's the recovery process like? You have a third plus degree tear. So just to like loop everyone in, usually if it's between a third and a fourth degree tear, a lot of times it's surgery. So they'll take you to the OR and really do like surgical repair for that. So you probably like skirted away from not having surgery, like just by a hair.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, they were definitely, I think it was like 45 minutes or almost an hour. My mom was like, holy cow. And it was, felt like a full operation that was happening in that delivery room. And then I was just a wreck. Like I couldn't really move or function for the next, I mean, it was months. Like, and that sounds like a really big exaggeration, but I didn't feel even like a normal human being for months. My walking was impacted, my sitting was impacted, my sleep, everything. Um, and I didn't go back to a doctor until my 6 week OB appointment. And she looked and she was like, yeah, you're still really damaged in here. And I said, oh, okay. So do we extend my medical leave? Because, you're telling me not cleared, right? Like things are still really not great. And she said, no, we don't extend that unless you have like a serious condition that hospitalizes you. And I'm just sitting there like, this is normal. And, yes, I'd had friends who had had babies and whatnot, but I'm just sitting around like, is this literally what women do day in and day out? Is just grin their teeth and bear it. And like, unfortunately, I think more do than should, but it was crazy. Like, even my mom, though, who obviously had had me, was like concerned about my recovery and like, this isn't normal. Like, you shouldn't have to be in this much pain or this like mobily not able to like debilitated.
yeah. What did the doctor say then? Did they prescribe pelvic floor physical therapy? Anything like that?
No, no,
Okay.
no. She just said, you know, give it time.
Okay.
That birth is a traumatic experience and that your body went through a lot and you'll heal up eventually.
Okay. So then lead us down the path. Like, how did you know what to do? What to like?
You know, I wish I remembered the moment that made me think like I'm freaking going, but I don't really. I somehow started hearing about you guys. I mean, we're in Edmonds, you're in Edmonds, right? So there's the proximity. Um, and I think maybe I just talked to some friends and they're like, gal, like go get, because intercourse was not enjoyable. Like, I mean, when people talk about the 6 weeks, I'm like, we were like 5 months before the very first try. And then it was not comfortable and it hadn't been comfortable for months and months. And so I think it was probably month 8 or 9 that I sought you guys out thinking, okay, like I should be recovered from the
Yeah.
birth event. And now I got to figure out how to get my functioning body back. And I was like, maybe they can help me with that piece.
Yeah.
There was no part of my brain that thought you guys could help me with the like earlier piece. And I so wish I'd come in because unfortunately I had healed, but with all of these like little body fixes that weren't quite the right way to heal, right?
Right.
Yeah.
What kind of what were the quick fix body fixes that you were doing?
I mean, I literally just had maneuvers with my body that I was like, nope, can't do that one. Like if I had slid a leg out, from my center, it was excruciating. And my hips, like I was favoring different, so I was walking differently. And so that had created different pain in my hips and my glutes and things. And yeah,
Were
it
you
was just,
going anywhere else? Were you going to pelvic floor PT? Were you doing chiropractic? Nothing.
no,
Okay. And then
nothing.
okay, so that 8, 9 month rolls around and you're like you decide to come in. I
Yeah,
think I did your consultation.
you did. Yeah. I think actually what it was is there was maybe a workshop at the Pilates place.
Okay.
And maybe I came in after that, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Trying to think of it what it was. Yeah.
I think
And
that's
to
what it
be
was. Yeah.
yeah. Um I honestly don't even remember the beginning stages of my like recovery with you guys because for a while I couldn't feel anything. Like I
Wow.
remember you guys being
Wow.
sort of shocked, like, is this painful? And I was like, no, I don't know. No, because the scar tissue was so intense that like I was numb essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I jump in a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, there was such damage and such scar tissue, not just in the first layer, but in all the layers of the pelvic floor. And so I can't remember how long your initial course of care was, but it was significant. Really
Yeah.
trying to work through this scar tissue. Um, Probably more than like my guess is around 16, 20 visits. I would imagine that first course of care was at least
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about lots and lots of scar tissue, and that's before we even start to like retrain your core, right? Like we were just
Mhm.
through getting this, these layers of muscle healthy. And it wasn't even like working a lot through your abdominal organs because we were so focused on getting this pelvic floor to be able to move again, getting it comfortable. Um, and then I don't know where my timeline is, but somewhere in like the May to July, August in 2023, when we brought in shockwave therapy, you were like, I
Mhm.
was like, because your scar wasn't like it would hold like some of our progress, but I was like, there was something that was still catching so deep inside
Yeah.
the pelvic floor. It was like we could not dissolve that scar. Like we were working it
Mhm.
but like, and then you could still feel it with intercourse, I believe. And so it was like but your
Yeah.
sensation, I think at that point your sensation had returned.
Yeah.
Um, and so whatever, yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
it had. I remember because you were like, can we try this? We've never done this in this area. And I was like, why not? Right? Like, let's do it. And I talked to my husband about it and I remember him saying, like, is it safe? And I'm like, well, I mean, unfortunately, they haven't really tested this on women, in this area because they don't really care, just from like a general research thing.
But they do it on
He was like,
penises.
okay. Yeah, they exactly that's what I said. I was like, no, don't worry, they know it works for men, so I'm assuming, right? I have tissues. So and yeah, I remember we started that, and even and then you guys were like, your pain tolerance is insane, right? And I think it took a couple of shockwave sessions to break through whatever the big holdup was in the scar tissue. And then I was like, oh, yeah, like I can feel it. I mean, it's manageable, but I had to breathe through it. And I was like, this is a sensation, which unfortunate, like was fortunate and unfortunate, right? Because I'm like, things are happening now. I can feel stuff and, yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, that's like miraculous, but like that is truly like you obviously had some nerve damage, severe nerve damage to your
Yeah.
pudendal nerve
Yeah.
and entrapped in some scar tissue. So the fact that this like tissue regeneration that we were doing with with the radial shockwave, I mean, that's huge. And like it really can help not just with sensation from like scar tissue, but even from like an orgasm perspective. It can help improve like
Yeah.
climax and all that. And yeah, I just think it's like the new wave of like vaginal rejuvenation, if you will.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it changed the tissue so much.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so we got you to a good point. I
Yep.
think you went on your own for a little bit, or maybe you were doing maintenance care. You were doing
No,
maintenance?
so we did get me to a point, and I was like, whoa, I mean, I am so much better than I was.
Yeah,
I think I'm good to go,
yeah, 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 yeah.
catch you guys later. Catch you at my next birth or my next pregnancy, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Um, and so my husband and I had been varying levels of like trying, and I say that because, no goalie, but maybe you're not tracking. And then you start tracking temperature and you start tracking with a six, and then you're like, okay, what's happening here? And so you just get a little more detailed every single month. Like I'm missing something. And it got to a point where I was like, okay, this is most people at this point. Like I do know that secondary fertility is a thing. So I was like, what's happening here? And I came back in for a revisit, and I definitely hold stress and tension. I mean, everybody does, but I think I more so in my pelvic floor. And it had like basically blocked back up a little bit. And so I know that our first few sessions for me coming back were just re-releasing everything,
Yeah,
using the shockwave. And then I think we started on focusing on just the pure, like you even said to me, you're like, it's not going to be beneficial for your body, or you're not going to be able to get pregnant basically if your systems aren't moving and flowing and expanding and contracting in the right way, because your body isn't working the way that it is made to. So
yeah.
we had to get all that moving.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, so you came back in, you were trying to get pregnant, and so we got your pelvic floor moving again, and
Yeah.
that's a good case. Like, but like everybody holds stress in their pelvic floor. Like we
Yeah.
all tighten up, and that's what I think.
Yeah.
Like you get in shape because you go to the gym, but if you stop going into the gym, you get out of shape, right? Like
Yeah.
that's just the thing. And like the pelvic floor is kind of like that, and that's why it's like having like we have the maintenance care for a reason. Really, it's because like we want to keep these pelvic floors mobile and
Yeah.
dynamic so that it doesn't get out of shape, right? Because it's one of those things that Kegels aren't going to keep it in shape. Going to the gym is great and important, especially if your pelvic floor is dynamic, but it doesn't keep it open. And like
Yeah.
we live in these like flight or fight, high stress environments, especially as like moms, right? Like you're carrying your family. You're carrying your job. You're making sure everybody's fed and alive. You're having fights every single day before most people even wake up. Like that, like it's a different lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like
It
that's and so much of that is held in our pelvic floor and we get that tension around there. So yeah, we had to start opening that up. And then the other thing we started to do is we moved the shockwave to really open up your abdomen. And I think
Yeah.
because so much of the first round of your pelvic floor therapy, we focused so much on the pelvic that we
Yeah.
probably also didn't fully restore what's called your visceral motility. So how we got the organs moving again. And
Yeah.
when you were kind of saying like everything has to move, um, like in your body, regardless of whether you're breathing or not, your organs are moving. So you're having peristalsis where the poop is getting pushed along. You're having your ovaries float, and that's what then jiggles an egg loose. And then that egg goes down the fallopian tube and then hopefully gets fertilized in the tube and then drops down in the fertilized fashion to embed in the uterus. But that takes movement of the body. But when there's scar tissue or maybe there's a lot of tension in the abdominal wall, and
Mhm.
tension in the pelvic floor, that can affect the visceral motility. So just to like add the medical layer
Yeah.
on top of how you said it,
Yeah.
which was absolutely beautiful. But that's really where like the fertility part comes in. And then
Yeah.
we've just found like adding the shockwave therapy with the protocol that we've created for fertility has just been absolutely epic in freeing up the ovaries,
Yeah.
freeing up the fallopian tubes, and then somehow miraculously giving everyone pain-free periods and then getting them knocked up. It's been a beautiful journey.
Yeah, I mean, we started, trying March of 23. And then I came back to you guys, I think in the fall. And, you became very aware of my fertility plans or pregnancy plans. And then we hit shockwave hard
Yep.
January of 2024 because we first focused on restoring like my pelvic floor and getting that released. And then we hit hard January of 2024. And I was in an appointment with Katrina, with Dr. Katrina, and she said, okay, when is your period due? Like, where are we at? Because you guys are being very aware of, when we could do shockwave versus when we should hold off on shockwave. And so we were scheduling it out. And I was like, oh, it should be here any day, actually. And I like in that appointment looked at my calendar and it said I was 3 days late. And I was like, weird. I did not realize that. And she was like, oh my God, you're pregnant. I went home, I took a test, and I was pregnant.
Yeah.
Like,
So how
she's
long after that was adding the fertility protocol?
well, so we started the shockwave what we're considering
Yeah.
fertility.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So we started that in January and that was I found out um mid-March based on an ovulation cycle in February.
Yeah. So we only had,
So it
it
was
was
one
probably
month.
only 8 sessions then of shockwave because it was
Yeah.
probably just January and February.
Yeah.
And then you conceived in that February month, and then yeah. So
Yeah.
we didn't do it in March. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was such a glorious day finding
Like
that out. And
we even thought that we had missed that cycle, just from like a kind of timing perspective. Some things have been going on, and I was a little down and out. And I was like, wait, what? Like I've tried to be so perfect and like hit the window, hit the tail end, the front end, the everything end. And that one I was just like, we missed the cycle this month. Like, come on. And yet still, I'm like, wait, we were shocked.
magic. That baby just knew when they wanted to come in, and they just needed to be freed up,
Hmm.
man.
Yeah.
Um,
And then set in the panic moment of, you know, this is real life. I am going to have another delivery event. I mean,
yeah.
hopefully. And is my body prepped for this? Like, what is going to happen? So, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's when we really started talking about like the importance of prenatal prep and like really
Yeah.
making sure pelvic floor is ready. I think what did us like you had such dense scar tissue. And so the
Hmm.
doctor is not wrong, right, for saying if you have a grade 3, grade 4 tear, you might need a C-section. Let's not risk ripping you back open to a point where you're
Yeah.
going to blow through the anal sphincter and then you really won't have bowel control.
Yeah.
I mean, the one beautiful thing about our regenerative technologies and Shockwave is that we can now we can restore a lot of that back because of the cellular turnover, the collagen that lays down, and like I mean it's just so advanced, right? Like we're restoring tissue in a rate that like we've never been able to do before, and that
Yeah.
we just haven't been able to do with our hands from a manual pelvic floor physical therapy standpoint.
Yeah.
Um, so the doctor's not wrong in telling you that, but he also didn't know the work that you had put in to
Yeah.
change the texture of your pelvic floor, to change that scar tissue. And like we were dealing with a completely different human. And I'm
Yeah.
gonna like preface this to say, like, even if you didn't have another delivery, if you decided not to heal your pelvic floor tissue, your body would compensate pretty okay for probably 5 to 10 years. But when you walk around with cemented scar tissue in your pelvic floor, you are not getting the shock absorption from your core. So you're wearing out your hips, you're wearing out your back, you're going to end up with
Yeah.
sciatica, you're going to get some knee pain. And then that's going to, in your 40s and 50s, you're going to go down the routes of
Yeah.
injections, of surgeries, and then eventually like you'll just be the lady with the bad hip, and oh, and by the way, you started peeing your pants, and this like all goes back, right, to like you
Yeah.
decided to make a change to your pelvic floor even
Yeah.
when the doctors did not suggest it. But like this is the prevention
Yeah.
that I think that like everybody needs to hear, because it is
Yeah.
hard, especially with a newborn and 2 kids now, to like choose yourself to be like, I am going to come to my appointment, even though you feel like you're drowning and you're like, I'm okay for now. Like nothing is massively wrong. I'm okay, whatever. Like I'm just going to deal with that later. But then the fact
Yeah.
is like, it doesn't change in 5 years. Like if you don't put yourself first in the beginning, you're not going to put yourself first in five
Yeah.
years. And then in 10 years, you're you're screwed a little bit. And the fact of
Yeah.
like our joints have now been wearing out a little bit and we just don't
Yeah.
get the integrity back. So,
Yeah.
anyways,
I
great job.
actually I switched OBs for this pregnancy, and I walked in that room, and he, was very kind, had a great bedside manner. He had read my chart, and he had kind of felt inside, and he was like, you can elect for a C-section if you want. Like, based on everything that I'm seeing, feeling, looking like, and that's what you were saying. Like, he was like, my research shows us we don't have great ways to ensure that this isn't going to happen again. He was like, you are at greater risk of having a similar or worse outcome. And if it's a worse outcome, we don't have great repair models. And so you just have to pick what your risk tolerance is for this, because obviously there are still risks of C-sections, even though they're very common. And it's a major surgery. And that's the thing. Like my mom, my husband, everybody, they meant well, but they had seen my prior recovery and were just like, we want you to pick the C-section because it's just a little bit more in their mind known of what the recovery is going to look like. And I was like, but you're literally cutting through, like, the known is that it's going to be rough, you know? They're like, yeah, but less rough than what you went through. And I even told the OB, I said, I'm going to pelvic floor therapy. I'm going to see what I can do. I'm going to see how I feel. Um, and he was like, absolutely, I think you should. He was a great advocate for it, but he also said, the way that our tissues um, respond in like a Zen environment where you're very focused on that versus like in a kind of traumatic delivery event, which he was like, the best delivery and the worst delivery. He was like, we still call those pretty traumatic events for your body because it's a big deal. He's like, you just don't know how the tissue is going to respond in that moment. So it definitely, I don't want to say it was a scare tactic because I don't think that was his intention. I just think he was trying to say, from my knowledge, from my research, I can't say that you're going to have a good outcome
Right.
with pelvic floor, right? And then
So what made you like, how did you have the gusto to be like,
I just think that the different, like, I could go into a session and I could breathe and I could feel everything. I could feel exactly what I was doing. I could feel when I had a breath that wasn't very helpful. I could feel when I had a breath that was super helpful. I could manage discomfort differently. And like, you guys even did some, what is it, like mantras and stuff of like, and visualization of like, yeah, childbirth is not comfortable, but that discomfort is beneficial. Like all of it is working to get your baby out and bring them into this world. And so like we did some of that work. And I just was like, I think I can do it. Like I literally remember telling my spouse and my mom, I was like, I want to give this another try. Like, and I had some friends who had had C-sections for medical reasons, and they were like, I can tell you don't want a C-section. I was like, sometimes like you want to go into the second thing, whatever it is, kind of prepared, right?
yeah,
I was like, and if I elect for a C-section, I'm going in with zero preparedness. I have no idea what's about to happen. I am just as green as the gal who went in for her first birth. And I'm like, I want a little bit of preparedness. I want to kind of know what's about to happen to me, to my body, what I might feel. And I just want to have an opportunity to do it better. And I was like, I didn't know anything about breathing a baby out or different kinds of breath and relaxation and, thinking of it differently as this is beneficial discomfort and just reframing your mind. I was like, I don't know why, but I just felt like I could do this better. I could do this so much better. And I want to have the opportunity. Of course, I was still scared, but like it was worth the risk to me, I guess. They asked me all the way up until like, I mean, well into my third trimester, have you decided? Have you decided? Have you decided? And I was just like, because I was on the fence, I couldn't ever make a full decision. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to figure out, I'm going to see what I can do. And they're like, okay, got it.
oh my gosh. Like the grit, I think. I think no, that grit's not the right word. It's grit, but it's self-belief. Like you had the self-belief, and I think that's really hard to have any self-belief, especially when you have your family, well-intentioned or not, going,
Yeah.
wanting you to make these decisions. You have the medical providers well-intentioned to try and get you to make the decision that they think is in your best interest. But
Yeah.
somehow, like you're a special person, you had that self-belief to really be like, no, I'm going against the mold. Like I'm changing this right now.
Yeah.
And where did that come
Well,
from?
I
Just
mean,
like, I know this isn't part of
to
the
be
story.
fair, it didn't come from me. It came from you guys. Like
Yeah.
literally, I had people feeling my tissues and being like, holy cow, like, do you feel that? I can move this. This is moving. Like you're breathing, And I would have moments where I was like clenching and like trying to run away from you because of pain. And then I had a change where I was able to breathe through it and relax into it. And unfortunately, when you relax into it, then you just go deeper. And I was like, oh, okay. No, but I just, I was able to literally like have it happen, like show myself that we could get through it. And that's why I joked. I was like, can I have you guys like come into the hospital in early labor and like get me into the mental like state to do this? Because that's what I need.
Yeah.
Like I was so scared that the second that, real labor started, which again, I'd never experienced going into labor naturally. I was so scared that I was just going to go into panic and everything would clench up. And I'm like, I need a session. I need an emergency session to get me in this like frame of mind. But there was no time for that.
No, not in yours, not in your case. So take us through. Tell us.
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, I don't think this really matters, but at like 35 weeks, I had an OB appointment and I was like 1 centimeter dilated, which obviously there's multiple factors, but I was like, oh, okay. Like I didn't remember having any opening in any of my appointments leading up to my first birth. And so I was like, maybe that's a part of like my being able to relax and my body's just kind of starting the process slow and whatever. Um, I went to dinner with my parents the night before and they had asked me, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, why? And they're like, oh, you're just breathing. And I was like, oh, I just do this like all the time. Just to make sure that like I still have the ability to relax and whenever I want to. So I would just do it. It would just be a part of like my like daily ritual practice. And we're sitting at dinner and they're like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, sorry. Didn't think about it. Um,
Where were you having dinner? Just curious.
we went to the keg in
Nice.
Linwood and
Okay.
yeah,
Love
we
it.
got my like favorite, the little shrimps and the little dish. I can't. It's my favorite. It was
Yum.
my like treat to myself.
Okay.
Um, and then we went to sleep. The next day was my actual due date. And I woke up at 1:30 in the morning, I think it was. And I, went to the bathroom and I came back and I was like, I think I feel something. But it was like just like so deep, deep internally, but it was like a little twinge. It was like a little flutter. And I was like, I wonder if that's something. Like, is this like the very, very early stages? And to be fair, it's crazy that I could even feel that because now I'm like, I'm just so much more in tune with my body and what's happening, right? And then over the next, I want to say like hour or so, it was there, but like, meh. And we were in and out of sleep. And then things intensified. And I was like, man, I could literally feel two different kinds of pain. There was some pain in my lower back, and then there was that internal flutter. And I was like, but they were very separate. And I was like, the internal flutter, I can manage. I can breathe through that. That's fine. The back pain, I was like, what the heck is this? So I started Googling. I was like, is this back labor? Because they say it's like worse than contractions. I can't tell what's going on. So I want to say it was like 3 a.m. or so, maybe 3:15. I got up and I had, the big ball. And I was like, let me just do some rocks and some breathing and see if I can get this back to release. And I had my husband come over after some time and I was like, can you just rub down my back? I just feel like that would feel nice. Well, he rubbed up. That was the wrong thing to do. I was like, what are you doing? And I was in enough pain at that point that like doing the wrong thing was aggravating. And then he rubbed down my back, but I was still just super like breathing through everything. And it just didn't seem like I was in the early stages of labor. And when he rubbed down my back one time, something flipped. And I was like, what happened? Oh my gosh, what happened? I got a massive wave of nausea. I like crawled my way to the bathroom, thought I was going to get sick, didn't. And then I was like, I need to get to my bed. I need to be comfortable and like relax. That's the best place for me to do that, right? So we got on my bed. Um, oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. I timed one contraction just to see because I was like, I think that this is very early. I think that I'm being a wuss right now. Let's just time it. It was 1 minute and 7 seconds. And I was like, oh, that was like way longer than I thought. I thought they were like 20 seconds long. So, anyways, sorry, all of that stuff happened with the ball. And then I got back in bed and my body pushed just naturally. And I could feel the compression of my water like a ball. And then it just burst. And what it felt like to me was that my baby went from wherever she was, whatever station she was at, and just basically rip roared through the birth canal, but like not painfully, just slid through the birth canal. And she was like at my vaginal opening. And I was like, that's not real. You feel a lot of things, but that's not real. For some reason, I turned myself onto the other side, my left side. Um, and my mother-in-law had walked in. It was like 4:10 at this point, and she sees my baby crowning. She was like, "Oh my God, oh my God, a baby's coming!" Like she thought she was just coming over because my husband had said, "Hey, mom, we might be going to the hospital. She's got some back pain. Like maybe you can come over." She didn't get dressed. She didn't get ready for the day. Thankfully, she just got in the car, drove over, and she was like, I'm here. And Press was like, come upstairs. And baby was like there. I felt her, everything. And then there was this weird panic moment where I was like, is it her head? And they were like, I think so. I'm like, what do you mean you think so? Like we were all just being ridiculous because it was just such a crazy moment.
Yeah.
Um, my husband calls the paramedics. We're like, hey, can somebody come like help us deliver this baby? And the woman on the other line, they just kind of assumed that that was the plan, right? We found out later that unfortunately the paramedics had been told that I was like 24 weeks along, so they thought they were walking into something totally different. They said, "Oh wait, this is your due date? Was there any issues?" And my husband was like, "No." And they're like, "Okay, yeah, I mean, keep going." And I had my mother-in-law said I had 5 contractions. My body was naturally pushing, but I like actively helped push through 3 of them. I delivered her head, and I delivered the first half of her body, then the second half of her body, and she just came right out on the bed. And literally all the paramedics were like, keep going. Yeah, I mean they showed up 2 minutes before she was out.
Oh my
And that was
goodness.
that. Yeah.
And just so
Exactly.
the
I mean,
listeners know, this was not meant to be a home birth. This was absolutely meant
this
to
was
happen in the hospital.
not meant to be a home birth at all. I wanted to be in a hospital. Even when the paramedics came in and I was like at the 11th hour of everything, I was like, can I get some meds? And they're like, nah, girl, we're past that. I was like, okay, all right, that's fine. But I will say, like, when things switched, I kind of did go into panic. And I was, then I double panicked because I was like, I know that being stressed and like having panic isn't helpful for your body to relax. And it took my brain a while to realize like this is happening at home. This is where you're delivering your baby. Because I kept going, how do I get down the stairs? How do I get into the car? How do I withstand a car ride? I kept trying to solve for how do I get to the hospital. And all during that time, I was panicking because there wasn't a solution. Like literally, it wasn't going to happen. And then at some point, I was like, I'm having my baby at home. And when that happened, my husband said that something completely switched and I relaxed and I was able to draw in long, deep breaths and like be a part of the situation instead of like acting against it. And that's when, boom, she was out, 3 pushes, like done.
Yeah.
Whereas last time it was 3 hours. And I'm like, oh my God. And so then, just like last time, I was like, am I okay? Is she okay? Am I hemorrhaging? Did I have a big tear? Because, everything says that the faster a birth happens, the more likely your tissues are to tear because they haven't necessarily had the opportunity to stretch and get supple, right? All right, at least that's my understanding. And I was fine. Like, my brain doesn't even comprehend how this all went down. But my husband literally the next day in the hospital was like, okay, that was 1000% worth it. And I was like, what? Like it wasn't worth it before? And he was like, I have to be honest with you. I, I didn't believe in it. And I was like, honey, I have been going to these people for how long? Like off and on for different issues. And you didn't believe in it. And he was like, but you did. He's like, so even though I didn't think that that was going to like physically help you deliver our child better or in a less harmful way to your body, he was like, the fact that it was giving you confidence was 1000% worth it. He's like, but damn. He was like, yeah, it works.
Can I send him a Google review link?
Yeah, right? Like I was literally like, I cannot believe that you didn't say anything to me this entire time. And he was like, you were getting something out of it. You were feeling more confident. He was like, but the fact that it physically like, holy cow. I mean, for so many reasons, I should have had a significant tear
Yeah.
because of the speed of that. I mean, I clocked the contraction at 3:40 a.m.
Yeah.
and he was out by 4:25.
Oh my.
Like,
Yeah. I mean, you covered so much there.
yeah, sorry.
It's so, I mean, it was just such a wild experience. And I think, yeah, to just to clue listeners in, you didn't tear it all. Like you had maybe one little minor like road
I
rash.
had one minor, I don't even think they called it like a first degree. And he was like, if I
Yeah.
even thought about throwing a stitch, it would be so much more harmful to your body than just it naturally, you know?
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay.
Yeah. So I mean it was pretty much nothing. And so you just had like you demonstrate this. It's not even miraculous because it's the fact that you did the work. Like you did this
Yeah.
work. You
Yeah.
changed your tissue. And like you even said like I wasn't connecting, like I was stressed as hell, right? And when this started,
Yeah.
like, you wouldn't let go of your body. But the reality is your tissue was already so trained that yes, do
Yeah.
we want your mind and your body connecting and working together? And
Yeah.
that's what happened. And that's why it took probably less than an hour. Yeah, of course. But like the fact is, like, your body was ready. So that baby was coming no matter what. And the tissue was just ready. And like when
Yeah.
you already developed like the quality of that tissue. So it was healthy, it was hydrated, it was super flexible. So even if you tried to tighten and hold that baby in, you couldn't have tried, right? Because it's like the tissue was
Yeah.
dynamic. And that's what you want. Like that is healthy tissue, whether you're
Yeah.
pregnant or not pregnant. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, this is so epic. I'm so happy hearing you say this. And
Yeah.
just like, it's amazing. And yeah, you put in the work. And I need your husband's testimonial because so many dudes, we've talked about this before, like
Yeah.
they don't trust them, they don't know, right? Like if you were going to
Yeah.
tell them like, dude, your wife can't have sex with you comfortably for the next 50 years because she's going to tear and have scar tissue and her libido is going to go to shit. Like they'd be like, "Oh, and I just got to get them doing this for the next 12 months." Like, yeah, dude, that's it.
Uh-huh.
Like, and then you'll be good for 50 years. Well, I can't promise you the relationship, but I can promise you her sex drive and her like ability to
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
want to engage in it, right? Like, is that not real though? Like,
Yeah.
it's just but guys don't think like that, and they don't realize the impact that it can make,
Yeah.
and that's on the medical profession and on us, not like educating them. But
Yeah.
I told this story once before, but like my neighbor stopped me at the bus stop in front of all these moms, and we got to help her during her third pregnancy and delivery. And he's like, I can't believe what just happened. He was like in shock. He stopped at the bus stop in front of all the moms, telling the moms like the baby just came out and she didn't tear and there was no blood. And like, he was like, the other birth traumatized the shit out of me. And she was so hurt. And now my wife is fine. There's nothing. She just had a baby and we're going home. And
Oh yeah.
he did this at the bus stop and my ego was like up here, man. Like I was
You're like,
riding so
thank
high
you.
here. Yeah. And I was like, I was like, can you just go drop that on Google for like all the husbands to see? Like,
Yeah.
please, you know?
Yeah. I mean, send it
So
to him because he's that guy. He's like, okay, whatever.
I love that. But it's beautiful that he believed in you and he was just like, whatever you want.
Yeah.
And obviously, like you're an empowered woman and like you make your own choices for yourself, but not everybody sits in that boat, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think that is super, 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 super cool. So thank you for sharing it.
Yeah. I mean, and then obviously the craziest part is like, so we asked, I was like, can you take me to the hospital? And they were like, oh, you want to go? I'm like, yeah, like I do. This was not a plan, but like I'm looking back, we're so excited about how that delivery went. And my husband's like, dang it. I wish that we weren't concerned because, like, again, not being the plan, you're like, what if something goes wrong? We don't have any medical professionals here. Like I said, they walked in like 2 minutes before
Right.
she showed up. He was like, I wish I would have delivered her. Like, I wish I would have caught her. I wish, dang it, but there was enough like kind of mayhem and chaos going on that he was like, "Ugh." um,
Wait, does
but
this
yeah,
have you guys wanting to go for number three?
I mean, it definitely opens up the conversation. So we were always like two or three, we don't know, we'll see type of a thing. But 1 billion%, if I had had a difficult delivery and difficult postpartum recovery, it would have been two. That's it. It's not even really a conversation. But now it's like, well, we just have to decide if we want three children. It has
Yeah, yeah,
nothing to do with my ability to carry or deliver or recover. It's just, do we want that chaos in our life like you do?
exactly. It's beautiful. I mean, I just think the more the merrier in
um,
so many regards, but you know,
but like I stopped, I mean, I wore the super attractive gauzy underpants for a few days and pads for a couple of weeks, and I stopped bleeding exponentially faster than last time. I didn't have the blood clots like I did last time. I was moving and walking, and I was like, I'm able to pick up my toddler like right away. I remember the car seat with baby in it. I don't want to say felt light from a strength perspective because I didn't work out during my pregnancy really. It was just more stretching and breathing and all that stuff. But I could just engage and like pick it up. So I didn't feel all of the like pressure and heaviness in my body to pick up her in the car seat. And that was like right away.
that's
It's
so
been
cool.
crazy. Like
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
literally like, yeah, I mean, just why not? This is comparatively, right?
Yeah.
And if this is somebody's norm, I'm sure that this is difficult too, because it is, right? But like going from what I did the first time around, I'm like, this is a piece of cake.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I'm a normal human physically again, at least externally, um, right away,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
opposed to having months and months of like me being a partial, mover.
Yeah. I mean, you're already like have to transition with a baby, right? And like you have the no sleep, you have the no energy. But then when you don't have your body and your body's not working for you, it's a whole nother game, right? And so
Yeah,
it's just like you have the body now, like your body's recovering still. Like obviously you grew a human for 10 months and it had to come out of your body, but like it
yeah,
everything is in such better shape. And it's beautiful that you said you didn't get it from
yeah,
an exercise plan because an exercise plan can't do this for the body.
yeah,
I think that is the biggest thing. It's like, yes, you did the breathing exercises, you did the stretching and all that, and you probably did some core stuff along the way, but you absolutely like you prepared your pelvic floor and now
yeah,
you're much stronger than the honestly than the mom who went to hit 3 to 5 days a week during her pregnancy could barely get her baby out and she's wrecked, right? We
yeah,
think you want to stay in shape during pregnancy. Like, yeah, I don't want you to lose your muscle mass and all that stuff, but let's get your pelvic floor and your core in real shape, right? And
yeah,
that's where it's like, I think the difference, and I was that person in my first pregnancy, like thinking, oh, I'm gonna be so healthy and this baby's just gonna come out without an epidural and be so fat. And like, no, I was pushing through a cement wall. So I was
yeah,
literally wrecked. Like, of
yeah,
course,
yeah,
you know? Um, yeah.
yeah,
So anyways, thank you for sharing. And
yeah,
so you're 8 weeks plus, you're in a good spot, relatively
yeah,
speaking. How's everything else going?
yeah. I mean, the hardest thing about life right now is literally just transitioning to two kids and managing the emotions of that, which is so, I mean, how grateful I am that I get to focus on how do I pay attention to my girls? How do I split time with my girls and make my oldest one feel so special still? Because if this were last time, I would be focused on me. Not that that's a bad thing, but it would have taken time away from my girls. And right now I have the ability to give them almost all of my attention because I don't have to worry about my medical recovery.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank
No,
you for
it's good.
sharing.
It's great.
So magical.
I'll
I
let you know if we're going for number 3.
well, I'll see you around here
We'll
as
wait
you
a bit.
what?
Huh? What'd you say?
I said we'll see you around here first.
Well, yeah, I know. I was gonna say we still got some stuff to do. I will say maybe that's one of the things, right? Like I mean, I am a superhero woman thing, right? Like I did some crazy stuff and I'm super proud of that. But because it was so simple, like the event was so simple because of all the work that was put in, I'm almost like brought down to earth a little bit that I'm not just perfect right now because it felt that way. I was like, I'm good. I'm golden, you know?
Yeah.
And then I come visit and it's like, okay, we still have to retrain some engagement and some, different things. And there's still a little tightness, obviously, because there was a big event that my body went through. And so that's like, I went so high that I'm like, okay, come back down to earth. You did deliver a child.
Yeah. 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 No, I mean, what a cool way and reflection to be in that space, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I think you're going to change a lot of people's lives with this episode, and I am just so thrilled that you came
I
on to deliver what you did because this has been
Hey,
so fun to hear.
I hope so. You guys got to stay busy because I keep telling all my friends, I'm like, they'll
Yay!
say, "Oh, I can do Kegels," and I'm like, "Good for you."
That's not the
And
goal. I'm taking,
I do your arm thing all the time. I'm like, okay, we need full extension. You're here, or I was here. This does nothing. I'm like, we need to fully expand.
I love
Okay.
it. Oh, I
I've
love it.
shown so many people that maneuver, and they're like, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense." I'm like, "Mm-hmm, mm-hmm." And I
Oh,
have my toddler, so when we're on the toilet, so I guess there's like a blow bubbles in the cup thing that some pediatricians say for kids, but literally for, I mean, months and months and months, girl's not even 3 years old. She'll be like, "Oh, my tummy hurts." And I was like, "Do you need to go poop?" And she's like, "I think so." And she would go, "Oh," and I'm like, "No, don't do that, baby." And so me and her now, when she's on the toilet, go, and she does it, and we like exaggerate it so aggressively because that's
yeah,
fun for her.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, make your belly big. And then, and
Yep.
then poop just comes out. And I'm
Yeah,
like, yes. If I could like help her grow up with a different pelvic floor,
yes.
like that
You
would be cool.
you already are. How magical. Good job. You're killing it.
Thank
Mm. Thank you
you.
for being here and doing
See you
this.
next week.
I'll see you next week. You are seriously the best.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care.